Hello, Castle Hill. Thank you for letting me talk to you for British Science Week. Some of you might remember me because I actually came to your school 2 years ago, I think, and spoke to you about what it's like to be a scientist that works in Antarctica. So thank you for listening to me again. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the trip that I did to Antarctica right after I spoke to you. I went for 8 months, so the whole winter, and I lived in Antarctica and studied sea ice. And if you think back really carefully, you might remember me describing sea ice to you, which is what happens when the air gets so cold that the surface of the ocean freezes from water into ice, and then you can walk around on the ice. And it's a really important part of the world. It happens all the way up in the north, in the Arctic, and all the way down in the south, in the Antarctic, which is where I go. And it's a very important thing because it helps set what sort of weather we have and also the temperature of the Earth. So it affects how warm the Earth is, and it actually keeps us cool. It stops us from getting too hot. So before you go to Antarctica, you have to go to South America because South America is the closest continent to Antarctica. And from there, you either fly or you get a boat in. And people used to only be able to get the boat before planes were invented. And sailors became very superstitious about the dangerous journey to Antarctica. And they developed a tradition of kissing the foot of this statue. And it's a statue of Magellan, who is a famous South American explorer. And now almost everyone who goes to Antarctica via the route that I went to Antarctica, they go and they kiss the foot of this statue for good luck to help keep them safe when they go to Antarctica. And that's what I'm doing in this picture. I'm kissing the foot of the statue of Magellan. And if you look closely, you'll see that it's so frequently visited that this individual foot has actually been polished by people touching and kissing the foot. So once you've kissed the foot, you can get on the plane. This is a special plane owned by the British government that flies British scientists in and out of Antarctica. And it's not a normal plane that's full of seats and full of people that bring you food. It's basically empty and it's full of cargo and bags and scientific equipment. And that's what it looks like on the inside. So those shiny metal boxes are a very standard box that we use to transport things in the polar regions where the weather is very tough and things get hurled around a lot. So almost everything goes in these metal boxes. There's lots of legroom on this plane. You can see those are my feet in the bottom, so you can stretch right out. This is where I went in Antarctica. This is the continent of Antarctica, this picture, and I went to an island called Adelaide Island, and it's marked on this map with a red cross. And it's just inside what we call the Antarctic Circle. And the Antarctic Circle is the area of the Earth that experiences total darkness for at least some part of the year. So in the middle of the winter when I was there was no light whatsoever. The sun never rose above the horizon. This is what it looks like when you fly into the research station that I stayed at. You can just about see, if you look very closely in the top left of the picture that I took, a big blue building. And that blue building is where the research station is. And behind it, there's a runway. And that's the runway that we land the plane on. So it's quite a small research station. There's only 25 people there over the winter. And there's not many scientists. There's about 4 scientists. And everyone else there is involved in key tasks that are required to run the station. So the people there are chefs, they're mechanics, they're plumbers, they're carpenters, they're essential staff for just keeping the base going over the winter. So as a scientist, you're in a very small team relative to the total crew that runs the station. Just before the winter starts, the British government sends a ship down. This is the Sir David Attenborough is the name of the ship, and it's named after the guy on TV that tells you about nature. And they drop off loads of food for several months for the whole winter. So this is the last time that we saw anyone else for many, many months. And we waved them goodbye as they sailed away and left us with fuel and food and medical supplies and the things we'd need to survive the winter. The first thing you need to get used to when you live in Antarctica is the snow. There's a lot of snow. So you can wake up in the morning and find that the wind has blown the snow around. So it's blown up against the door in a big pile, and you often can't get out and you can't get in. So you spend a lot of time digging with shovels to make sure that you can use the doors of the buildings on this research station. It's important to not get lazy about this because if the snow is up against the door, like in the photo on the left, and there's a fire, for instance, this is a fire exit. So you wouldn't be able to escape and it would be really dangerous. And fires do happen in Antarctica quite a lot. So a lot of your time in Antarctica is spent just thinking about safety and how you would cope with things in an emergency, because there's no fire engines in Antarctica, there's no hospitals in Antarctica. So you need to behave much more carefully than you would do in England. It's also very, very windy. This is a picture I took of my friend Vishnu, who worked with me for the winter in Antarctica. And you can see blizzards are really, really common. So as well as having a lot of snow, the snow is blown by very, very strong winds. And it's not just people that get blown around by the winds, it's all kinds of equipment. So it's barrels, it's tools, it's pieces of buildings that get ripped off by the wind. So it's kind of dangerous for a few different reasons. This is what it looks like when you head out. You don't have cars in Antarctica, you have snowmobiles. Sometimes people call them skidoos. So these things, they're specially adapted for traveling in the snow, and you ride them, and they're a bit like quad bikes, but without wheels. They have skis instead. And when you need to carry lots of stuff, you don't have the boot of your car, you have sleds that you drag behind the skidoos. So there's a lot of time packing skidoos and riding them around when you need to go to different places. And you can travel for a long, long time. Antarctica is very big. It's much, much bigger than the UK. It's actually bigger than Europe. So you can travel for days and weeks at a time on your skidoo and not see anyone or anything. And we did that. So here's a picture of a week-long trip that I took early on during my winter that I spent in Antarctica. It was just me and a guy who's a professional guide, and we went out on our skidoos on the left, and you can see the sleds that we packed on the right. They're full of stuff. They're full of tents, petrol for the skidoos. There's a bag of medical supplies if there's an accident. There's lots of bedding to keep yourself warm because it gets very, very cold. It can go down to minus 30 degrees. So each person brings a very, very big sled, and you need lots of spares as well. So if your tent is blown away in a blizzard, you need another one. So almost everything has a backup set so that you can survive if there's a storm. You can see in this photo we've pitched the tents, and they're very small little pyramid-shaped tents, and they're very old-fashioned. They're made of canvas, which is basically cotton, and it's not like a plastic tent that you would maybe camp in England. They're very old tents that haven't changed in their design for about 50 years, and they work very well. So if they're working well, why change them? So sometimes it's possible when you're on this island to go inside the ice. So the ice is often very thick, hundreds of meters thick, and it has these cracks in the ice called crevasses, and you can climb down inside these crevasses. And I thought I'd show you some photos of doing that because it's really spectacular. This crevasse was 60 meters deep, so if you imagine a tall person in England, it's 30 tall people stacked one on top of the other, head to toe. And you can climb down a rope to the very bottom, and it's like this other world of blue and white ice. It's quite dark in there, so you need a torch on your head. But you can have really, really good adventures right next to the station, which is a lot of fun. This is what it looks like inside one of those pyramid tents. The tents are made of red canvas, so everything inside is red, and it gives your experience inside the tent a very distinctive colour. Everything is pink, and it kind of messes with your eyes after a while. We also have these very old-fashioned stoves and lamps which run on paraffin. And paraffin is a bit like diesel that goes in a car. It's like a liquid fuel that you burn. It's not battery-powered at all. And it's not like the gas that comes out of some stoves. It's a liquid that you burn, which is very useful because the liquid never freezes, and the liquid is easy to just pour out of a bottle, so it's not a pressurized gas. This is what it looks like at night. Because the tents are red, it's red on the inside during the day, but they look red on the outside during the night. So you can look across the snow at your companion's tent and know that they're there because they're lit up like a big red Christmas tree. We also get involved with lots of science. This is a picture of a scuba diver about to jump off a boat, I think. I think she's been in the water, and she's come up, and now she's about to go back into the water. and they study the fish and the mud on the bottom of the sea and the plants that grow out of the mud. They have to be careful when they're scuba diving because there are lots of icebergs. Icebergs are these chunks of ice that fall off the land and then float around in the sea until they melt. And these are really dangerous if you're out in a boat because they get blown by the wind and they can move quite quickly. So whenever you're out in a boat doing science, you always need to be very careful looking around for these icebergs. But they're quite beautiful as well. And the seals like to climb up on them and they sleep on these icebergs because they feel safe. They get hunted by killer whales. You might know killer whales as orcas, but when the seals are lying on an iceberg like this, they're safe from that. So they tend to sunbathe on these things. This is a picture of one of those seals up close. There are lots of different types of seals, and I didn't realise this until I went to Antarctica, but this is called a Weddell seal, and he has a beautiful white and black coat and a very small head, and these are very, very good at swimming, these seals. Whereas these seals are called elephant seals, and they're a bit less pretty. They kind of roll around in the mud, and they smell really bad, and they lie on top of each other in big piles, and they're not as effective swimmers as the Weddell seals. The final kind of seal that we have is a fur seal, and you can tell why he's called a fur seal because he's furry. And these are the dangerous ones, at least when you're walking around on the land, because these fur seals, they're very territorial, which means they chase you if you think you've walked into the place that they live, and they can bite you really badly, and they have very, very dirty teeth. They don't brush their teeth. They're not like us. So once they bite you, your wound can get infected. And as I said, we don't have a hospital in our research station, so the consequences of being bitten by a fur seal would be very, very serious. So we stay well back from this guy. This is what it's like when the sea ice is frozen. So this used to be ocean. If you arrived in summer, you would be in the sea. But now the surface of the sea is frozen enough for us to ski around on it. And this is when we really got to work once that happened. Sometimes we need to take equipment out, scientific measuring instruments. So we would do that with these small blue sleds. And a big part of what we were doing is we would drill through this frozen layer of seawater, which is around 30 centimeters thick to 40 centimeters thick, so about this thick. And we'd measure how thick it is. And we'd also measure how salty it is and how thick the snow is on top. So here's a picture of it when there's no snow on top at all. Very, very easy to drill through. But here's a picture of it when there's lots of snow on top. And in fact, there's so much snow on top of this sea ice that it's actually pushed down the sea ice below. And the sea ice below is kind of under the water. So there's a layer of water on top of the sea ice. That means the snow on top of that is very wet. And we're very interested in that as scientists. So we measure how thick that wet layer is with a ruler. And we measure how thick the layer of dry snow is. And here's a picture of what that looks like. So at the bottom, there's a frozen layer of ice. And then there's snow that's fallen from the sky on top. And the bottom of the snow is wet and the top of the snow is dry. The scuba divers would also go out and they would take these samples from underneath the ice. So we would walk around on top of the ice and the scuba divers would cut holes in the ice and they would swim in the ocean underneath the ice. And that's what they're doing here. They've just come up and they've got some samples and they're going to so they've got little specimens of animals and mud, and they're going to hand those samples out to the people on the surface to preserve and study. So that's the last little picture that I wanted to show you. Good luck with British Science Week, and I hope you have fun, because science is not just supposed to be interesting, science is also often fun. So please do enjoy it.